I want to discuss, finally, I want to discuss Ross's discussion about good, and finally, just end this whole discussion about Ross and sort of get into virtue ethics. But Ross and Right and the Good, his basic idea of ethics and deontology and all this stuff is that when you do that, is that morality is something that is a part of the universe, and that we do things like this because of duty, and it's just a property of the universe. It's something that's just here. And with that, it's just sort of this present, like it's sort of this thing that's just woven into the fabric of the universe. And this is one thing that I don't have to disagree with, because I don't think that's correct. I strongly dislike the objective subjective distinction when talking about morality, because morality is all subjective. It's just about intersubjective agreement, which creates things like duties and oughts and normative theories and meta-ethical theories and all this stuff. But I want to discuss. Previously, I discussed his definition of right, which is right is when you do something, and the what happens when you do something right. Right, in Ross's sense, is that more good is thus created. And when something is done that is good, it's good based upon its one of three things, which is having to do with one of his six or so duties, which I've discussed previously, or it's based upon virtue, knowledge, or pleasure. The third one being pleasure, I would not use that unless it would have to be pleasure because of something being done. It seems like a sort of a consequential idea of pleasure, but I mean, I guess it's, if this was supposed to be something that would be like that, I would like to characterize it, because I don't like the way he characterizes it that much. I think it should be characterized in the manner of the virtue ethical eudaimonia, or the flourishing. The flourishing, or the eudaimonia in virtue ethics has to do with doing things based upon your virtue that's been building up inside you because of your actions that you've been doing, and thus you are in a sense happy, not in the consequential sense of happy, or the value hedonist or desire theory of happy, not by the greatest happiness principle, but in the eudaimonia virtue ethical sense of being happy, having that sense of having pleasure. If I think that there's any pleasure based in the word good, it would have to be from this idea of eudaimonia. And this is something I'll discuss further, because I'm reading a book currently by Richard Taylor, which is a introduction to virtue ethics, he talks quite a bit about that stuff in here, so I'm trying to get through that. But I think the biggest thing I would have to agree with the virtue in with the virtue part, definitely. I think personally that the good has to do with mostly virtue, which is why I'm sort of moving away from this deontological ethics. I'm sort of changing. My beliefs are changing here. It's moving from this deontological duty based ethics and morality to I'm thinking more about virtue ethics rather than this whole deontological thing. Even though I really still like this whole thing, it's just I feel like this is more plausible. The whole virtue ethics thing is more plausible when you have good and right that's basically based in virtue. That to me is very convincing. But I think virtue is definitely something it's definitely something that the good has something to do with, and I think that to better explain this is to have a definition of virtue, which is something that Socrates would definitely agree with, would argue with you back and forth. But that's something I want to get to later. But I wanted to discuss this, and I wanted to discuss if this is a good thing or not. Secondly, the idea of good being some kind of outcome or some kind of idea of knowledge, not an outcome. That's a bad word to use because it's not true. But knowledge, I don't see what that has to do with good. The good. The good to me would have to seem, you know, it seems to me that it has totally something to do with virtue, or it has something to do with just, and I want to just think about duties and oughts, but that's, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to think about this, and I guess maybe for the betterment of the entire universe, and not in the consequential sense. But I mean, it's just, but I don't know. I like that because I like the idea of virtue the most, just because it's better, and I like that, and I'm gonna sort of think about ethics in this way now from now on.